Well, who would have thought? I just needed to put ridiculous amounts of research into a video that ends up being over half an hour long in order to be even slightly noticed by the YouTube algorithm. Just kidding, I made a Reddit post about it. Hello and welcome to the MineFish. Cray here. And today, I have realized this channel's true purpose. That being... Diary of a Wimpy Kid videos. It only took 6 years to realize that a 40-minute video about Diary of a Wimpy Kid would allow me to finally surpass 1,000 views on a singular video, and nearly double my subscriber count. It was not Minecraft, not commentary, not parodies, but Diary of a Wimpy Kid analysis that was meant to be the true purpose for this channel. For real though, the attention this video has gotten has been pretty awesome. Jeff Kinney even watched it, and I'm still questioning how much longer Christoph or the machines think that they can pull stuff like this off. To get back on topic though, Jeff Kinney just released a new book to the series, and I've decided that I am going to review it. And, of course, I will be adding it into my timeline. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with that, it's all in that 40-minute video I've been referencing. It's linked in the description. Luckily, this video is not nearly as long. It's just going to be a fairly casual review. And with that, let's see how this new book, Big Shot, scores. I'm going to get this out of the way real quick. If you're afraid of any spoilers, go read the book. I'm not going to be avoiding anything like that in this video. With that said, I'm going to start out with a summary of the new story. It all starts out with Greg doing an abnormal, half-praising, half-lamenting, narcissistic tangent thing about himself, which would be expected. This type of opener has been the style of introduction for several of Greg's diaries. This time, it's about his experience with sports. He reminisces about his early days playing sports, and then brings us to the present day, where he wishes that someone would write a book about the majority of people that failed in sports, such as himself, in contrast to the plethora of success stories written about a few athletes. Interesting. Greg brings us into the following day, where it's the first day of school and everyone is talking about the upcoming Squid Game. It's going to be a competition where the winning class gets the day off from school. Everyone is taking preparation for Squid Game extremely seriously, so Greg does too. He goes to his dad, asking to help him train for Squid Game. They go to his dad's gym, and Greg is pretty much left to his own devices. He ends up on the treadmill for a while, where we get a glimpse into the state of the economy in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid universe. Soon after, Greg gets himself and his dad kicked out of the gym because he got a little carried away in the weightlifting area. I guess he really could have used some NRG water. A couple of days later, Greg's mom offers to help Greg get ready for Squid Game by eating healthy. Greg rejects this idea, but he still goes along to the store with her for his own intentions of filling the pantry with foods that he likes. Susan Heffley critiques Greg's choices of food at the grocery store, and we get a glimpse into how truly dystopian Greg Heffley's world is. We discover the crippling control Barry Bonanza has over the public school system's nutrition campaigns. The diary then jumps a week ahead to show us a wider scope of things happening concerning Squid Game. The janitors and lunch ladies are now competing, and students are being traded between classes. Even Greg gets traded along with a few other students. Shortly after, it is now time for Squid Game, but nothing too remarkable happens, aside from an underground betting scheme being discovered and the cafeteria ladies winning the competition. Because the lunch ladies get the day off, the janitors were assigned to make lunch that Friday, but the school gets too worried about their ability to cook, so they decide to call off Friday for everyone. Thus, with school out, Greg's mom makes a bunch of appointments for Greg and gets to talk to him about how Squid Game went. The conversation leads to Susan Heffley deciding that Greg needs to give sports just one more chance. Greg says he'll think it over and has a lengthy memory of the one sporting event he went to with his dad. The important thing to gather from this sequence is that we get what is probably the most direct reference to the Heffley family's church denomination, that being Catholicism. I actually did some more research on this, and apparently in the online version of the first book there is a reference to confessionals, and I believe the movie also features this, so maybe this isn't such a huge revelation, though I never noticed it. Either way, I found it interesting. Anyway, Greg ends up deciding to try basketball as a sport. He managed to throw a balled up napkin into a cup in the cafeteria once, so he gets the idea that throwing balls might be his best bet. His mom is overjoyed with the idea, but we later learn that Greg really only thought of basketball because he knew that he wouldn't have any chance of making the team in tryouts. Well, Greg attends the tryouts, and he ends up feeling pretty confident that he didn't make either team. But surprisingly, the next day, he comes home to his parents congratulating him. He didn't get admitted to either of the original teams for his school, but a third team had been formed instead. The team was created because one of the school's star athletes, a new character by the name Preet Patel, was unable to attend the tryouts. Since the school couldn't qualify him for either of the existing teams for his absence, Preet's father had the school make an entirely new team with the remaining students that didn't qualify, just so that his son could play. So, Greg now has to play on a basketball team for the season, which actually has some characters from previous books, including Edward Mealy from Broderick Rules, Darren and Marcus Woodley from The Last Straw, and Ruby Bird from The Third Wheel, as well as a few brand new characters. It's kind of like the Avengers, but a basketball team, and they're the kids that couldn't qualify in tryouts. And this is Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Yeah, they all have their quirks, which Greg makes sure to point out to us in his all-knowing narration of judgment. Mr. Patel, Preet's father, who agreed to coach the team, announces his commitment to train the group of misfits, but things are immediately off to a rough start. At first, they have to practice in the cafeteria since the school doesn't have enough gyms for the 3 teams, but they later get moved into the elementary school gym for practice at 9:30 in the evening. Mr. Patel tries to teach the team how to make free throws, and Greg eventually makes one by throwing it backwards over his head. Aside from that, not much progress is made, and it's all brought to an absolute halt when Preet tries to dunk a ball and manages to break his ankle. Because of this, Preet is out for the rest of the season, leaving Mr. Patel alone with a group of talentless kids. Still, he stands by his commitment to train them, and the season begins. Their first game is held that weekend, and they predictably lose without much resistance. The next day, they have another game with Plainview's rival town, Slacksville. Greg explains the deeply rooted rivalry between the two towns, and we witness their next game. The game ends 103-2 in Slacksville's favor. The rest of the season pans out, and Greg's team doesn't win a single match. The team and Mr. Patel are ecstatic for the season to be over, but this isn't quite the end yet. Greg's mom tries to encourage Mr. Patel to have the team participate in a competition that's being held for all of the teams in the state that didn't win a single game that season. Mr. Patel refuses to put the team through any more misery, but Susan Heffley won't accept defeat for her son and steps up to take the whole team to the competition. Greg's team, and now called the Winter Dogs, loses their first game at the tournament against the Mathlete All-Stars. They think that this means that they already get to go home, but Susan Heffley surprises them by revealing that only the losers move on in this tournament, meaning that they have to win a match before they can leave. So they have to keep playing. Continuing to lose, though, the Winter Dogs manage to make it all the way to the finals up against the Funky Dunkers. This is when Greg realizes that this is his team's last chance to win any game at all, as this final match has the potential to prove that they are the worst middle school basketball team in the state. Greg has no hope for the upcoming game, but things look like they might be getting better when Preet and his father suddenly arrive at the tournament. Preet thinks that he's healed enough to play, so he joins the Winter Dogs for the final match. He's able to make all his shots, but his inability to run allows the other team to make another score right after Preet would make his, since the rest of Greg's team is completely useless. Preet accidentally steps on one of the Funky Dunkers' feet, taking the player out of the game. The Funky Dunkers have to forfeit the match because they don't have enough players, but then the great Susan Heffley interjects that the Winter Dogs should win a match for real, and agrees to give them one of her own players to keep the game going. And who does Susan Heffley choose? Her own son. Greg soon realizes that the only reason he was chosen was to sabotage the other team through his absolute inadequacy in basketball. As the game nears its end, and the Winter Dogs lead by 2 points, the ball manages to fall into Greg's hands at the end of the court. He is instantly surrounded by his former teammates. Feeling overwhelmed by his teammates and apathetic towards the game in general at this point, Greg just chucks the ball backwards over his head. And it goes across the court through the hoop, giving the Funky Dunkers 3 points. The buzzer goes off and they win. The diary ends with Greg eating ice cream with the Funky Dunkers after their victory, and we get the sentiment from him that he should probably quit while he's ahead. Alright, let me get something straight. This is a review, not a summary. I know that I've spent the vast majority of this video explaining what happens in the book, but now I've got my own things to say, including what stood out to me, what I liked, what I didn't like, and whatever else. First of all, I certainly enjoyed the book. It's admittedly the first book in the series that I've been able to completely finish since the long haul, but that has less to do with the book forcing me to keep turning its pages and more that I wanted to make this video. I fell off the wagon with Old School. Still, it definitely felt like the Wimpy Kid style I remember, though with a newer feel that I've noticed in more recent books. I'm currently in the process of reading the books that have come out since and including Old School, so I don't have a complete case concerning what I'm about to bring up, but I've noticed how a lot of the books since the long haul have started having more of a focused story or topic to them. It's always been part of the style of these books to have Greg going on these tangents about things mostly unrelated to the quote-unquote main story, and I don't think that's ever completely gone away, but there has been a noticeable change in storytelling after the first few books. I guess you could say it started with either Dog Days or Cabin Fever, where both of those definitely had a summer vacation and winter theme, but they still had several branching storylines. I think The Long Haul was the first example of a very direct story where there wasn't much room for events not related to the road trip to be told. It looks to me like the same thing can be said about The Getaway, The Deep End, and maybe The Meltdown, and I'm confident to say that Big Shot falls into this category as well. Aside from the occasional flashback, Greg is entirely focused on the story surrounding the basketball team. Now, I don't think that this different style is a bad thing, but it does change the flow of the story compared to the earlier books in the series. These are diaries, journals, so it made sense for Greg to describe unrelated aspects of his life, with maybe some sort of reoccurring storyline. As the series went on though, maybe it was necessary for newer books to be more focused in order to avoid too much repetition. Speaking of old versus new styles with the series, there has been a criticism of newer books having too many capitalized words. I can definitely notice an increase in the more recent diaries compared to the first books, but in Big Shot, I think that Jeff Kinney has been able to reduce the frequency of them. They had started to be considered by some to be a problem because a lot of the time they could just seem out of place or overdramatic, but it didn't seem as obsessive in this book as it's been in others. Personally, I would prefer even less because it still feels out of place sometimes, but I wasn't particularly bothered by it, and the dialogue still flowed well. Anyway, here's why I specifically liked this diary. I believe the YouTuber Solar Sands was the first person I heard make the observation that Jeff Kinney has this uncanny ability to write stories and situations that just get worse and worse, constantly subverting your expectations. Well, this book is a fantastic example of that ability. Starting with Greg thinking that he's off the hook concerning basketball, to being put on a team exclusively made of misfits, to having that team's only good player get injured, to losing every game that season, and to Greg literally being responsible for his team being arguably the worst in the entire state. You get to enjoy the constant downward spiral this story takes from beginning to end. That is the core to what makes these books great and why I think Big Shot earns its place alongside the other classics in the series. I'm guessing that I probably should give some sort of rating to the novel, so for right now, I give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like that doesn't really say anything though, because I haven't given a relative rating to any of the other books, which is why I'm planning on releasing a video where I'll give a full ranking and rating of all the books. Expect that within the next month or so. Also, I'm sure you've been waiting to hear what I found concerning this book and my timeline, so here you go. Remember how The Deep End takes place in August? Well, Big Shot holds onto that consistency by starting in September. It goes through November, and following my timeline, this would be in 2011. And Greg would be starting his sophomore year. But Ruby Bird still has her 2 front teeth, even though she lost one back in the 3rd wheel, so maybe I should just stop. I did test out my whole calendar ordeal on the book, but there aren't any holidays, so I decided that it wasn't going to work out. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. I think the new diary certainly took its chance to be a big shot. Like and subscribe and all that if you enjoyed the video. I know it was nowhere near the extent to which I took my timeline video, but I wanted to at least get something out. I have some other projects in the works though, which should come out eventually, one of which will be far greater, and dive far deeper than even the timeline video. I'm Cray, your host for the MineFish, and see ya!